They called me a gold digger at my own engagement party. The groom's family whispered behind my back, thinking I wasn't good enough for their precious son. But when my brother walked through those doors, their laughter died instantly. What happened next changed everything forever. Hi, I'm Clara, and today I'm sharing the most shocking night of my life. If you've ever been underestimated or judged unfairly, this story will hit close to home. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what happens next. Let me take you back to 6 months ago when I first met Leo. I was grading papers at my favorite coffee shop downtown, The Daily Grind, completely absorbed in my work as a third-grade teacher. The place was my sanctuary, a small island of calm in a bustling city, filled with the comforting aroma of roasted beans and the low hum of conversation. That's when this charming guy, tall with an easy smile and eyes that seemed to genuinely sparkle, accidentally bumped into my table. His briefcase caught the edge, and my meticulously organized stack of student essays went flying, along with my half-full latte. Coffee splashed across my lesson plans, creating a Jackson Pollock-esque masterpiece of brown on white. I gasped, more in frustration than anger. Instead of just offering a hasty apology and walking away, he froze, his face a mask of genuine horror. "Oh my God, I'm so incredibly sorry," he said, his voice rich and warm. He immediately knelt, helping me gather the damp papers, his expensive-looking suit jacket brushing against the floor without a second thought. He insisted on buying me another coffee, and then another, and what started as a clumsy accident turned into a 3-hour conversation. Leo had this infectious laugh and a way of listening that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He told me he worked in finance, a vague term that I didn't press, and I shared stories about my students, the funny things they said, the small breakthroughs that made my job feel like the most important one in the world. Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about molding young minds, but Leo seemed fascinated. He asked questions, remembered the names of the kids I mentioned, and laughed at their antics. Our relationship blossomed quickly and felt like something out of a movie. Leo was a master of small, thoughtful gestures. He'd surprise me with a box of my favorite hard-to-find French pastries or a bouquet of wildflowers for no reason at all. Sometimes he'd just show up at my small apartment with takeout after a long, exhausting day of teaching, knowing I'd be too tired to cook. He never made me feel like my modest lifestyle was lacking. When I cooked simple pasta dishes in my tiny galley-style kitchen, he'd devour it with a gusto that made me feel like a Michelin-starred chef. When we watched movies on my old, comfortable couch, a hand-me-down from my parents, he'd pull me close and whisper that it was perfect. I knew Leo came from money. It was evident in the subtle details, the perfect tailoring of his shirts, the quiet confidence in his stride, the sleek, dark sedan he drove. He lived in a stunning penthouse apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. But he never flaunted it or made me feel small because of our different backgrounds. He'd casually mention family dinners or business trips to Europe, but I didn't realize the true scale of his family's wealth until he proposed. The proposal itself was beautiful, intimate, and deeply personal. He took me back to The Daily Grind, the place where we met. He had rented out the entire coffee shop for the evening, filling it with candles and my favorite flowers. He got down on one knee, and with tears in his eyes, he told me that bumping into my table was the luckiest accident of his life. The ring was stunning, a classic diamond that was elegant and understated, but I knew it was far more expensive than anything I had ever owned. It was only after I said yes, my heart soaring, that the first shadow of anxiety appeared. He started talking about the engagement party his family insisted on throwing. "They're so excited to meet you," he said, squeezing my hand. "Mom's already planning everything. It's going to be at the estate in Greenwich." I should have paid more attention to the worried look that flickered across his face when he mentioned his mother. I should have registered the slight hesitation in his voice, but I was too caught up in the moment, too blinded by love to see the warning signs. The week leading up to the party was a blur of anxiety. I agonized over what to wear. I wanted to make a good impression, but I also didn't want to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I spent hours online, looking at dresses that cost more than my monthly rent, feeling a growing sense of inadequacy. I finally settled on a simple but elegant red dress from a department store, one that made me feel confident, without trying to be something I wasn't. Ryan assured me I looked beautiful, but I caught him fidgeting with his tie more than usual as we drove out of the city and into the sprawling, manicured landscapes of Greenwich, Connecticut. When we pulled up to the Sterling family estate, my breath caught in my throat. I had seen big houses before, but this was something else entirely. A long, winding driveway led to a massive, stone-faced mansion that looked like it had been plucked from the English countryside. The circular driveway was lined with luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces and Porsches, perfectly manicured gardens designed with geometric precision, stretched as far as I could see, and the grand entrance was flanked by imposing marble columns. "Wow," I whispered, suddenly feeling very small and out of place in my department store dress. Leo squeezed my hand, his own a little clammy. "It's just a house, Clara. And these are just people." But the moment we walked through those massive, ornate front doors, I knew these weren't just people. This was old money, generations of inherited wealth that created an invisible, impenetrable barrier around everyone in the room. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low murmur of polite, confident conversation. The women were dripping in diamonds, their jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. The men wore watches that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and everyone moved with that particular, effortless grace that comes from never having to worry about a single bill. Leo's mother, Eleanor Sterling, glided toward us with a smile that was perfectly crafted but didn't reach her eyes. She was the epitome of old money elegance. Perfectly styled silver hair, a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost a fortune, and a string of pearls that looked heavy enough to be a weapon. "Clara, darling," she said, her voice smooth as silk as she air-kissed both of my cheeks, her perfume enveloping me. "How lovely to finally meet you. Leo has told us so much about you." Her tone was polite, but I caught the way her eyes, sharp and analytical, quickly assessed my dress, my shoes, my simple silver necklace. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, being judged and found wanting. "Thank you so much for having this party, Mrs. Sterling. Your home is absolutely stunning," I said, my voice sounding small in the grand, echoing foyer. "Please, call me Eleanor. And yes, it's been in the family for generations," she replied. "I do hope you'll be comfortable here." The way she said comfortable made it clear she doubted I ever could be. It was a subtle but powerful dismissal, a reminder that I was an outsider in her world. And as the night wore on, I would discover just how deep that sentiment ran. Before I could respond to Eleanor's subtly barbed welcome, Leo's sister, Victoria, appeared at her mother's side. If Eleanor's condescension was a finely honed stiletto, Victoria's was a sledgehammer. She was younger, perhaps in her late 20s, with the same sharp features as her mother, but none of the practiced restraint. She looked me up and down with a barely concealed disdain, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raising a fraction of an inch as she took in my entire appearance. "So you're the teacher," Victoria said, her voice dripping with a bored sort of amusement. She made the word teacher sound like I'd just confessed to being a professional mud wrestler. "How noble of you to work with children. I love what I do," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady, refusing to let her see how much her tone stung. There's nothing more rewarding than watching a child's face light up when they finally understand something new. "Oh, I'm sure," Victoria said, a patronizing smile playing on her lips. It must be so refreshing to have such simple pleasures in life. So quaint. I felt my cheeks flush, a hot wave of anger and embarrassment washing over me. Leo, finally sensing the escalating tension, stepped closer, placing a protective hand on the small of my back. Victoria, be nice. Clara is amazing at what she does. She's been teaching for 5 years, and her students absolutely adore her. 5 years, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully, picking up the thread of the interrogation. And you're what, 26? So you went straight from college into teaching? No gap year in Europe? No internships at prestigious companies? I wanted to start making a difference right away, I said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. The truth was, I couldn't afford a gap year. I had student loans to pay off, and I was eager to get into the classroom and start my career. The mention of student loans, however, seemed to hang in the air, causing a brief, uncomfortable silence. In their world, college was a rite of passage paid for by trust funds, not a financial burden that would take years to repay. As the evening progressed, I was introduced to a seemingly endless parade of aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. Each interaction felt like a small, polite test that I was failing miserably. They asked about my family with a feigned interest, but I could see the flicker of disappointment in their eyes when I mentioned my parents' modest jobs. My father was a mechanic who owned his own small garage, a man who could fix anything with his hands. My mother worked as a cashier at a local grocery store, known for her warm smile and kindness to every customer. They were good, honest, hard-working people who had taught me the value of integrity and compassion. But in this room, their professions were a mark against me. The questions kept coming, each one a subtle but effective tool to highlight the chasm between my world and theirs. Where did I go to school? A state university, not an Ivy League institution. Where did I live? A small, one-bedroom apartment across town, not a sprawling condo in a dormant building. What did my parents do? Working-class jobs that required sweat and effort, not managing portfolios or sitting on corporate boards. Each answer seemed to confirm their worst suspicions about me. I was an outsider, an interloper, someone who simply didn't belong. I eventually found myself standing alone by the champagne table, a flute of bubbly trembling in my hand. I watched Leo work the room with an easy, inherited confidence. This was his world, his natural habitat, and he belonged here in a way I never would. He moved from group to group, laughing, shaking hands, completely at ease. I was trying to work up the courage to approach a group of women who looked to be about my age, when I overheard their conversation. "She seems sweet enough," one of them, a blonde in a glittering cocktail dress, was saying. "But really, what does Leo see in her?" "It's obvious, isn't it?" another replied, a brunette with a sharp, knowing look. "She's after his money. I mean, look at her. She's pretty, I suppose, but she's so ordinary. That dress is probably from Macy's. Poor Leo." The first woman sighed dramatically. "He's always been too trusting. Remember when he dated that girl from college? At least she had a good family background. Her father was a senator." I stood frozen, the champagne glass feeling cold and heavy in my hand. These women, who didn't know the first thing about me, had already written my entire story. They had cast me as the villain, the gold digger, the fortune hunter who had somehow tricked their precious Leo into proposing. The worst part was that Leo seemed completely oblivious to what was happening. He was deep in conversation with his uncles, probably talking about business or golf or whatever wealthy men discuss at parties. He had no idea that his family was systematically dismantling my character behind his back. As the evening wore on, the subtle digs and whispered comments became more direct. Eleanor cornered me in the powder room, a lavish space with marble countertops and gold-plated fixtures. Her mask of polite civility finally slipped. "Clara, dear," she said, reapplying her lipstick with practiced, precise movements, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "I hope you understand that Leo is very precious to us. He's the heir to a considerable fortune, and we want to make sure he's with someone who truly cares about him for the right reasons." "I do care about him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I love him." "I'm sure you think you do," Eleanor replied, her tone suggesting she believed nothing of the sort. "But love doesn't always conquer all, does it? There are practical considerations, compatibility, similar backgrounds, common interests." "Leo and I have plenty in common," I countered, my voice a little stronger. "Do you?" Eleanor turned to face me fully, her expression a mixture of pity and steel. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you have very little in common, except for a mutual attraction that will inevitably fade once the reality of your different worlds sets in." I wanted to argue, to defend myself and my relationship, but her words hit too close to home. I had been feeling the weight of our different worlds all evening, wondering if love really was enough to bridge such a massive, daunting gap. When I returned to the party, I felt like every eye was on me, waiting for me to make a mistake, to do something that would confirm their worst opinions. I tried to engage in conversations, but every interaction felt stilted and forced. I was hyper-aware of every word I said, every gesture I made, terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing. That's when Leo finally noticed something was wrong. He appeared at my side, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. "Hey, you okay? You seem quiet." I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to unload the burden of the whispered comments, the cruel laughter, his mother's gentle but devastating suggestion that I wasn't right for his world. But looking at his face, so earnest and caring, I realized he genuinely had no idea what was happening. He was insulated by his privilege, by the lifetime of belonging that made him blind to the subtle cruelties being inflicted on me. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." "We can leave soon," he promised, squeezing my hand. "I just need to say goodbye to a few more people." But as he led me back into the crowd, I heard Victoria's voice rise above the general chatter. She was telling a story to a group of her friends, her voice bright with malicious amusement. "So then she said she wanted to make a difference with her teaching," Victoria was saying, mimicking my voice with an exaggerated saccharine earnestness. "As if being a third-grade teacher is going to change the world. It's so cute when poor people think their little jobs matter." The group burst into laughter, and I felt something inside me snap. I had endured their condescension, their judgment, their whispered insults all evening. But hearing my life's work, the thing I was most passionate about, dismissed as a meaningless little job, was the final straw. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I do think it matters. I think helping children learn to read and write and think critically about the world around them is incredibly important work." The laughter died abruptly. Victoria turned to face me, her expression of surprise quickly morphing into one of embarrassment at being caught. "Oh, Clara, I didn't see you there. You were just mocking my career and my life." I finished for her, my voice gaining strength. "I get it. I'm not wealthy. I don't have a trust fund, and I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I work hard. I care about what I do. And I love your brother. I'm sorry if that's not enough for you." The room had gone quiet, and I could feel everyone watching us. Eleanor appeared at Victoria's side, her face pale with mortification. "Clara, dear, I'm sure Victoria didn't mean—" "Yes, she did," I said quietly, my gaze sweeping across the room. "You all did. I've spent this entire evening listening to you discuss whether I'm worthy of Leo, whether I'm here for his money, whether I belong in your world. And you know what? Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I never will." I turned to leave, my only thought to get out of that house, away from those people. But Victoria's voice, dripping with satisfaction, stopped me in my tracks. "Well, at least she's finally being honest about it," she said. "I mean, let's be realistic here. What could a public school teacher possibly offer someone like Leo, except the obvious?" That's when I felt my phone buzz again. It was my brother, Marcus, hope you're having fun. If anyone gives you trouble, let me know. I'll be in the city tomorrow anyway. Looking at that message, I realized I was tired of defending myself to people who had already decided I wasn't good enough. I was tired of pretending their opinions mattered more than my own self-worth. I typed back quickly, my fingers flying across the screen. Actually, could you come now? I could use some support. His response was immediate. On my way. Give me the address. I sent him the location and then turned back to the room full of people who had spent the evening tearing me down. You know what? I said, my voice now calm and resolute. I think I'll wait for my ride outside. As I walked toward the door, I heard Eleanor calling after me. Clara, please, let's talk about this rationally. But I was done talking. I was done trying to prove myself to people who would never accept me, no matter what I did. I stepped outside into the cool night air and waited, a strange sense of calm settling over me. The game was over, and a new one was about to begin. I stood on the wide, stone-paved terrace, the cool night air a welcome relief against my flushed cheeks. I wrapped my arms around myself, not from the cold, but as a way to hold myself together. The sounds of the party drifted through the open French doors, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the faint strains of a string quartet. It all seemed so distant now, like a scene from someone else's life. My phone buzzed again. It was Marcus. ETA 20 minutes. Hang in there, little sister. I stared at the message, a small, sad smile touching my lips. Marcus had always been my protector, my champion, even when we were kids. He was 8 years older than me, and when our parents couldn't afford to send me to college, he had worked multiple jobs to help pay my tuition. He'd been so proud when I got my teaching job, and he was thrilled when I told him about Leo, but Marcus didn't know about this side of Leo's family. He didn't know that they saw me as a threat, as someone who didn't belong in their world. I'd been so focused on impressing them, on trying to fit into their mold, that I had forgotten I had people who loved me exactly as I was. I had forgotten my own worth. I was about to text back when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, hoping it was Leo, but it was Eleanor. Getting some air? She asked, joining me at the railing. Her voice was gentler now, but somehow that made it worse. I know these parties can be overwhelming. It's a lovely evening, I said, my voice non-committal. I didn't trust myself to say more. Clara, I want to be honest with you, Eleanor said, her voice laced with a practiced sincerity. I think you're a nice girl. I really do. But I don't think you understand what you're getting into. I turned to face her, my arms still wrapped around myself. This family, this lifestyle, she continued, gesturing vaguely at the sprawling estate. It's not as glamorous as it might seem from the outside. There are expectations, responsibilities, social obligations. Leo will inherit the company someday, and he'll need a wife who can handle that world. Someone who understands the pressures, the politics, the nuances. What are you saying, Eleanor? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. I'm saying that perhaps you should consider whether this is really what you want. Whether you're truly prepared for a life that's so different from what you've known. It was the kindest, most maternal way anyone had told me I wasn't good enough all evening. But it hurt the most because it came with a veneer of concern. I think I know what I want, I said, my voice gaining a little strength. Do you? Eleanor's voice was sad now, filled with a pity that I found more insulting than her earlier condescension. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're drowning in a world you don't understand. And that's not fair to you, or to Leo. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't find the words. Maybe she was right, maybe I was drowning, but I wasn't going to let her be the one to push my head under. When we returned to the party, I felt like everyone was watching me, waiting for me to do something that would confirm their worst opinions. I tried to engage in conversations, but every interaction felt stilted and forced. I was hyper-aware of every word I said, every gesture I made. That's when Leo finally noticed something was wrong. He appeared at my side, his brow furrowed with concern. "Hey, you okay? You seem quiet." I wanted to tell him everything, but looking at his face, so earnest and caring, I realized he genuinely had no idea what was happening. He was a product of this world, and he was blind to its casual cruelties. "I'm fine," I lied, "just a little tired." "We can leave soon," he promised, squeezing my hand. "I just need to say goodbye to a few more people." But as he led me back into the crowd, I heard Victoria's voice rise above the general chatter. She was telling a story to a group of her friends, her voice bright with malicious amusement. "So then she said she wanted to make a difference with her teaching," Victoria was saying, mimicking my voice with exaggerated earnestness, as if being a third-grade teacher is going to change the world. It's so cute when poor people think their little jobs matter. "Victoria, she teaches third grade," someone corrected with a laugh. "Third grade, kindergarten, what's the difference? The point is, she's delusional if she thinks she's going to fit into this family. Can you imagine her at the country club? At charity galas? She'd be completely out of her depth." The group burst into laughter, and I felt something break inside me. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I do think it matters. I think helping children learn to read and write and think critically about the world around them is incredibly important work." The laughter died abruptly. Victoria turned to face me, her expression of surprise quickly morphing into one of embarrassment at being caught. "Oh, Clara, I didn't see you there. You were just mocking my career and my life," I finished for her. "I get it. I'm not wealthy. I don't have a trust fund, and I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I work hard. I care about what I do, and I love your brother. I'm sorry if that's not enough for you." The room had gone quiet. I could feel everyone watching us. Eleanor appeared at Victoria's side, her face pale with mortification. "Clara, dear, I'm sure Victoria didn't mean—" "Yes, she did," I said quietly, my gaze sweeping across the room. "You all did. I've spent this entire evening listening to you discuss whether I'm worthy of Leo, whether I'm here for his money, whether I belong in your world. And you know what? Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I never will." I turned to leave, but Victoria's voice, dripping with satisfaction, stopped me. "Well, at least she's finally being honest about it," she said. "I mean, let's be realistic here. What could a public school teacher possibly offer someone like Leo, except the obvious?" That's when I felt my phone buzz again. It was Marcus. "Almost there." I typed back quickly. "Come to the front. I'll be waiting outside." I turned back to the room full of people who had spent the evening tearing me down. "You know what?" I said, my voice now calm and resolute. "I think I'll wait for my ride outside." As I walked toward the door, I heard Eleanor calling after me. "Clara, please, let's talk about this rationally." But I was done talking. I was done trying to prove myself to people who would never accept me, no matter what I did. I stepped outside into the cool night air and waited. 20 minutes later, I saw headlights turning into the long, winding driveway, but instead of Marcus's usual car, a convoy of black SUVs was approaching the house. I watched in confusion as they pulled up to the entrance, wondering if the Sterlings were expecting more guests. The first SUV stopped directly in front of the main entrance, and I saw security personnel step out. They were clearly professionals, dressed in dark suits and moving with the kind of awareness that comes from extensive training. They positioned themselves strategically around the entrance as the second SUV pulled up. That's when I realized what was happening. The passenger door of the second SUV opened, and my brother Marcus stepped out. But this wasn't the Marcus I was used to seeing in his casual clothes when he visited my apartment. This was Marcus in his full professional capacity, a perfectly tailored suit, confidence radiating from every movement, surrounded by a security detail that moved like a well-oiled machine. You see, there's something I hadn't told Leo's family about my background, something I'd kept private because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for who my brother was. Marcus wasn't just my protective older brother. He was Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Industries, one of the most successful tech companies in the country. He had built his empire from nothing, starting with a small software company in his college dorm room and growing it into a multinational corporation worth billions. But to me, he was still just Marcus, the brother who helped me with my homework, who taught me to drive, who was there for every important moment in my life. He had always insisted that I live my own life, make my own way, and never use his name or wealth as a crutch. As Marcus approached the entrance, I saw movement inside the house. People were gathering at the windows trying to see what was happening. Through the glass, I could see the confusion on their faces as they took in the security detail and the obviously important arrival. Marcus spotted me immediately and smiled, the same warm, genuine smile I'd known my whole life. He walked over and pulled me into a hug, ignoring the fact that we were being watched by a house full of people. "Hey, little sister," he said softly. "Rough night?" "Something like that," I managed, feeling the weight of the evening's humiliation lifting slightly just from his presence. "Well," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "let's go inside and meet these people who've been making you feel unwelcome." As we walked toward the entrance, I could hear the buzz of conversation inside growing louder. Someone had obviously recognized Marcus, and word was spreading quickly through the party. The front door opened before we reached it, and Eleanor appeared, her face pale with shock. Behind her, I could see the other guests crowding into the foyer, their earlier smugness replaced by confusion and growing panic. "Mr. Thorne," Eleanor stammered, clearly struggling to process what was happening. We weren't expecting, that is, we didn't realize that Clara was my sister." Marcus's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Yes, I imagine that might have changed how you treated her this evening." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Victoria in the background, her face white with horror as she realized the implications of her earlier comments. Leo pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. "Marcus," Leo said, his voice barely above a whisper, You're Clara's brother?" "I am," Marcus replied, his arm still around my shoulders, "and I understand there's been some confusion about my sister's worth and intentions." Eleanor was struggling to form words. "Mr. Thorne, if we had known, we never intended, that is, we certainly didn't mean any disrespect. Didn't you?" Marcus's question was quiet, but it carried clearly through the room. "Because from what I understand, you've spent the evening questioning my sister's motives, mocking her career, and suggesting she's not good enough for your family." The crowd in the foyer was growing as more people pushed forward to witness this unexpected confrontation. I could see the panic in their eyes as they realized they'd been insulting the sister of one of the most powerful men in the country. Victoria finally found her voice, though it was shaking. "Mr. Thorne, we didn't know. If we had realized who Clara was." "Who she was?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "She's exactly who she's always been. A dedicated teacher, a caring person, a woman who works hard and loves deeply. The only thing that's changed is that now, you know, her last name carries some weight." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the people who had been so dismissive of me earlier. "My sister chose not to use our family name or wealth because she wanted to be valued for who she is, not what she has. She wanted to build her own life, make her own way. I respected that choice, even though it meant watching people judge her unfairly." Leo stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Clara, I had no idea. I knew you had a brother, but I didn't realize—" "She didn't tell you because she didn't want it to matter," Marcus said simply. "She wanted you to love her for herself, not for her connections or her family's money." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very people who had accused me of being a gold digger were now faced with the reality that I had access to more wealth than they did. I just chose not to use it. Eleanor was still trying to salvage the situation. "Mr. Thorne, please understand, we had no way of knowing. If Clara had mentioned her family background, why should she have to?" Marcus's question cut through her excuses. Why should anyone have to prove their worth through their family's achievements? My sister is valuable because of who she is, not because of who I am. He turned to address the entire room. I've built my company from nothing, and I've learned that true character isn't measured by bank accounts or family names. It's measured by how you treat people, especially those you perceive as having less power than you. The silence stretched on as his words sank in. These people, who had spent the evening convinced of their own superiority, were now faced with the reality that they had shown their true colors to someone who could have significant influence over their business and social lives. The silence in the grand foyer was thick with unspoken apologies and frantic calculations. The guests, who had so easily dismissed me just moments before, now looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. They were not seeing Clara, the third-grade teacher. They were seeing the sister of Marcus Thorne, a man whose influence could make or break their careers and social standing with a single phone call. Marcus wasn't finished. His gaze, cold and sharp, swept across the room, finally landing on Eleanor. "What disappoints me most," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is that you couldn't see what I see when I look at my sister. I see someone who has dedicated her life to helping children, who works long hours for modest pay because she believes in making a difference. I see someone with integrity, compassion, and a strength of character that is far more valuable than any inheritance." He looked directly at Eleanor. "Instead, you saw someone to be dismissed, someone whose worth was measured only by her bank account and her family's social standing. You couldn't see past your own prejudices to recognize the remarkable woman standing in front of you. Victoria, who had been so cruel and dismissive earlier, was now visibly shaking. "Mr. Thorne, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "You meant exactly what you said," Marcus replied calmly, his words cutting through her stammered excuses. "You meant to make my sister feel small and unwelcome. You meant to suggest she was here for money rather than love. You meant to mock her career and her life choices." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The only thing you didn't mean was to be held accountable for it." Leo finally spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were treating you this way. I should have noticed. I should have protected you." I looked at Leo, this man I had thought I loved, and realized that his apology, while sincere, missed the point entirely. He was sorry because he had discovered I was connected to power and wealth. But what about being sorry because his family had treated another human being with such cruelty? "Leo," I said quietly, my voice steady for the first time all evening, "the problem isn't that you didn't know about my brother. The problem is that you didn't defend me when your family was tearing me apart. You didn't notice that the woman you claimed to love was being humiliated in your own home." The truth of my words hit him visibly, and he stepped back as if I'd slapped him. He had been so caught up in his own world, so blind to the subtle and not so subtle cruelties of his family, that he had failed the most basic test of a partner, to be a safe harbor in a storm. Marcus squeezed my shoulder gently. "I'm proud of you, Clara. You've handled this with more grace than they deserved." He looked back at the assembled crowd. "I want to be clear about something. My sister doesn't need my money or my influence to be worthy of respect. She's worthy of respect because she's a good person who makes the world a better place through her work and her character." Eleanor made one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Mr. Thorne, please know that we have the utmost respect for your sister. Perhaps we can start over, have dinner, get to know each other properly." "I don't think so," Marcus said firmly. "You've already shown who you are. My sister deserves better than people who only value her when they think she might be useful to them." He turned to me. "Ready to go home?" I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. As we walked toward the door, I could hear the frantic whispers starting behind us. These people were already calculating the damage, wondering how this night would affect their business relationships and social standing. But I didn't care anymore. I was done trying to prove myself to people who would never truly accept me. I was done pretending that their approval mattered more than my own self-worth. As we reached the SUV, I turned back to look at the house one more time. Through the windows I could see the party guests still gathered in the foyer, their faces a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and panic. Leo appeared in the doorway calling my name, but I didn't stop. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Marcus held the car door open for me. "You know," he said with a slight smile, "I was looking forward to meeting your fiancé. Too bad he couldn't be bothered to defend you when it mattered." As we drove away, leaving the Sterling estate and its inhabitants to their panicked whispers, I felt something I hadn't felt all evening: peace. The people at that party had shown me exactly who they were, and I was grateful for the lesson. I deserved better than conditional acceptance. I deserved better than people who only valued me for my connections. And most importantly, I deserved better than a man who would stand by while his family attacked the woman he claimed to love. The next morning, I returned Leo's engagement ring by messenger, along with a simple note. "I hope you find someone your family considers worthy. I hope I find someone who knows I already am." The fallout from that night was swift and, from what I heard, brutal. The story of the Sterling engagement party spread like wildfire through their social and business circles. The Sterlings, who had prided themselves on their impeccable reputation, were now seen as petty, prejudiced, and foolish. Several of their business partners, who also happened to be partners of Thorn Industries, quietly distanced themselves. The family, who had tried so hard to protect their world from an outsider, had ended up damaging it from within. I didn't revel in their downfall. I was too busy rebuilding my own life. The experience had been painful, but it had also been liberating. It had forced me to confront my own insecurities and to recognize my own worth. I threw myself back into my teaching with a renewed sense of purpose. My classroom, with its bright posters, messy art projects, and the eager faces of my students, felt more real and more valuable than any mansion in Greenwich. 3 months later, I met someone new. His name was Ben, and he was a fellow teacher at my school. He was kind, funny, and passionate about education. He didn't have a trust fund or a fancy car, but he had a wealth of character and a heart full of compassion. When I told him about my brother, he was impressed but not intimidated. He respected my choice to build my own life while still honoring my family connections. He loved me for who I was, not for who I was related to. That's the difference between genuine respect and conditional acceptance. Real love doesn't need a net worth statement to prove its validity. And that's how one night changed everything. Sometimes the people who underestimate us get the biggest shock of their lives. And sometimes the most painful experiences are the ones that lead us to our greatest strengths. I learned that my worth isn't determined by my bank account, my family name, or other people's opinions. It's determined by my character, my actions, and the love I bring to the world. And that is a lesson worth more than any fortune.